So over the past few weeks, the internet has been swarming with the rumor that Disney is planning to erase or place in a different timeline the sequel trilogy of Star Wars. Of course, this idea of a rumor has been around for just a few years at this point, and because that there are so many doubters like Screen Rant who object to this idea. But in light of some developments that have already happened a few months ago and recently stated announcements of Disney's theme parks, that has rekindled interest of this potential shift for the franchise. In this video, I will show you some convincing evidence that would support in favor of this rumor in a more objective perspective. If you haven't already, hit those like, subscribe, and notifications bell buttons to stay up to date with this channel's weekly videos. And with that said, buckle up, this is a bit of a longer video than usual. Let's talk. Hey everyone, Ayo here with 4BZ Entertainment News and Gaming, and I just wanted to share some insights about the potential validity of this rumor that the Star Wars sequel trilogy being no longer part of the main continuity of films. Now, in case for those of you who don't know, the sequel trilogy are the three main films that take place after the Return of the Jedi and were made under Disney's ownership. Unfortunately, the second and third movie, The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, while commercially successful in their theater runs, both making a little over $1 billion total each, but were also highly divisive and split the fan base for a variety of reasons. Staying on the topic at hand, let's go back to the year of 2018 with the release of the 13th episode in Season 4 of the animated show of Star Wars Rebels, titled A World Between Worlds. In this particular episode, we see the main protagonist, Ezra, thrown into a nexus featuring endless pathways that lead to different points in the Star Wars series. It was there he saved Ahsoka Tano from her battle against Darth Vader that took place at an earlier point in the show's timeline. The main theory that Star Wars fans came up with was basically Disney reclassifying The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, The Rise of Skywalker as an alternative timeline through some kind of means of utilizing the manipulation of the world between worlds, and therefore creating a new series of films and shows that won't be anchored to those three Disney films. Opponents of this theory suggest and claim that Disney would never ever consider doing such actions. In an article written by Liz DeClain for Screen Rant last year, concludes that Disney's Star Wars wouldn't retcon the sequels trilogy because of how it's part of the lore that is entwined with the rest of the story through shows like The Mandalorian, The Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka, and the upcoming Rey movie, forming a new Jedi Order. So the question is, what would be some valid reasons why Disney Star Wars would either change the story of the sequel trilogy or shift the focus entirely in a newer direction with Star Wars in general? Well, a few months ago, I made a video talking about the president of LucasFilm, Kathleen Kennedy, departing from her position and the company. And it turns out that she wasn't the only high-profile resignation at Disney, which so happened to be the CEO of Disney himself, Bob Iger. And I bring up these two people first because it was Bob and co-chairman and chief creative officer of Walt Disney Studios at the time, Alan Horn, who bought the original three outlines of movies that were the creator of Star Wars, George Lucas's original ideas for episodes 7, 8, and 9, according to LRMonline.com, citing Bob Iger's book, The Ride of a Lifetime, 15 Years as CEO of the Walt Disney Company. It was then to the dismay of Lucas when he found out that along with the other Disney executives, Bob Iger, Alan Horn, and even the woman that Lucas himself appointed to be the president of his company, Kathleen Kennedy, unanimously decided not to go with his original three outlines of movies in favor of their overall direction because they wanted to appeal towards fans' expectations.
Right.
It was because of this series of decisions and resignations that influenced what we will further explore in my next point. So let's talk about
Merchandising.
Merchandising? What's that?
Where the real money from the movie is made.
It is not the newest of news that Star Wars merchandise as a whole sells billions of dollars every year for decades now. However, when it comes to the most important aspect, that being toy sales, might be a strong point to consider when the idea of a shift in direction of the franchise as a whole is on the table. With that said, I'd like to point you towards a YouTube channel I've been paying attention to for nearly a decade at this very subject matter, and his channel goes by This channel helped me stay on the pulse of the cultural zeitgeist by seeing what Star Wars toys aren't selling with customers and families. More specifically, and in largely, the Disney-era Star Wars toys are not selling even in the clearance bins at stores and also at Ollie's stores throughout the country. And this channel still makes and documents these videos today, but not just for Star Wars, but for Marvel as well. So what's the reason, you may ask? Why is the Disney-era Star Wars not selling? To simply put, the characters from this era are not as memorable like Han Solo, Leia, and Luke Skywalker, C-3PO, R2-D2, and Darth Vader. Action figures like Rey and Rose Tico, for example, have been on store shelves in some cases for years, and those characters are overshadowed by Star Wars legacy characters, as I mentioned earlier, superheroes from Marvel and DC, and even anime characters like Goku, Luffy, and Naruto. Looking at what Axio.com's analysis on the global action figures market on the top selling products of 2024 until now, Star Wars isn't even mentioned once, especially when it comes to licensed superheroes that dominates 45% of the market share here in the North American market. That includes Hasbro's Marvel Legends, McFarlane Toys, DC Universe, and Hot Toys. The other candidates include the growing market of 3D printed DIY action figures or do-it-yourself action figures made popular by TikTok, and the fast-growing market of anime and manga collectibles like Bandai Namco's SH Figure Arts, and I don't even know these companies like Good Smile Company and Mega House. Even Kickstarter projects for independent action figures is mentioned here, and the last time Hasbro did a Kickstarter was for the HasLab Reva Inquisitor lightsaber that failed its 5,000 backer goal by only securing 1,500 due to a lack of demand back in 2022. Finally, we get to the announcement of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge in Disneyland. Oh my goodness, what a failure that was, with consistent technical difficulties, non-immersive atmosphere, and let's not forget that 5,000 plus per person rented U-Haul truck, transport ship, crammed cabin hotel experience, and god-awful live-action performances, the Galactic Star Cruiser, which all of this is a video in its own subject I cannot go fully into here. This video is long enough. However, I would like to point out that ever since the conception of this theme park, its main focus was on the Disney-owned era of Star Wars, the sequel trilogy, from the characters, location, and the story at that fixed point. Fans long since requested for an appearance of legacy characters like Darth Vader, but was largely disregarded, and the park has also experienced low attendance due to declining interest. It wasn't until earlier last month in April, the time of this upload, that it was announced Galaxy Edge will feature legacy characters like Vader, Han Solo, Luke, and Leia will be making appearances beginning on the 29th of that month, according to StarWars.com. I bring up all these points because merchandising and theme parks are vital for marketing major franchises. Take Disney, for example. Millions of people from around the world go to their theme parks and hotel resorts just for the immersive experience. Think about all the associated merchandise with Disney's branded characters on t-shirts, shoes, hats, sunglasses, coffee mugs, plushies, toys, rides, and themed restaurants with themed foods and desserts. Home goods like pillows and blankets, electronics, soaps, shampoos, toothbrushes, toothpaste, and the list goes on just to drive the point that even with poor box office runs for a movie owned by a studio, it's the buying power and emotional attachment of the paying customers who drive the demand in the market. And when a major company like Disney that spent $4 billion acquiring a once evergreen intellectual property like Star Wars, you best believe an effort to revitalize interest is going to be made, even when that very same company split the fan base to begin with. Maybe not to retcon the sequel trilogy outright, but to refocus on something that could work in the true spirit of Star Wars, maybe a possible retelling of events of the sequel trilogy to make these characters better, almost like how Dragon Ball is doing retelling Beerus to better fit the overall story, but let's just see what happens from here on out. My final point to drive home is Disney's most streamed Star Wars content on Star Wars Day back on May 4th, and unsurprisingly, according to Nielsen, that of the top titles that people watched, none of them were Disney's sequel trilogy, but instead the original and prequel series of movies and shows. Sure, Andor and Rogue One are there, and yes, they were produced by Disney, but that show and film were not part of the sequel trilogy timeline, but once again, the original. They were there to supplement the original timeline. So with that said, this is in my eyes a direct correlation that the Star Wars audience's interests are at presently, which gives Disney the justification of adding the legacy characters at Galaxy's Edge. And if that is the case with this perceived evidence, then I wouldn't be surprised when we get something along the line of a reboot or a revised story of the sequel trilogy. But we'll have to wait and see about that. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments about this. And I know this was a pretty stuffed and longer video than usual, and I do apologize for the late upload and absence, but I kind of needed the time to really make this video with a lot of effort. So with that said, thank you for your time. Thank you for watching this video all the way till the end. With that said, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.